Patrick, we're speaking English today again.
Again? Yes, we do that.
Thankfully.
How come?
How come we have a guest today?
Yeah, we do. Would you like... so, if we say, Chris, welcome to the show, I don't think a lot of people will know exactly who you are.
Yeah, tell your audience.
But if I would say A American...
They might catch that name. They might get that name.
Yeah.
So that
so
the
why
A
don't you
stands
tell
for
us,
angry American.
Sorry.
And that's fine. I know we probably have a little bit of a lag here, but the A stands for Angry American, which was just a screen name that I used on the forum, survival forum, where I wrote the first 2 books. And when people encouraged me to publish it, and I did, I was like, well, I can't put my name on it because nobody knows my name. Everybody only knows me as my username on the forum. So that was how I first published it, was actually under Angry American. And when Penguin Books came along and made an offer to buy the first 2 books, and I finally agreed on that, they're like, but you got to come up with a different name because we're not putting that on the cover of a book. So I was like, how about A American? And they're like, okay, we'll go with that. So...
Sounds like quite an interesting start to your career.
It was. I never intended to be an author. I simply wrote the first 2 books for my own entertainment, for my own fun, something to do. I worked on the road at the time, spent a lot of time in hotels, and not one to sit in bars. So I would sit in the hotel room and write the story, and that's all I was doing, writing a story. I thought, but it just took on a life of its own, and here we are, 11 books later. I'm working on number 12, and there's I've published a total of 22 titles now. So, never imagined it. Never even thought I was doing something like that.
Mm-hmm. We talked about prepper fiction in some of our episodes. And in Sweden, when we talk about prepper fiction, there are always 2 book series. There is the 3-book series, 1 Second After, and then your series, with Going Home as the first book. Why are your series so popular, do you think?
Well, a couple reasons. One, I think my book series hit the market at exactly the right time. Because, like you guys said, when my books came out, there was 1 Second After, and there was another couple of books out by another guy, and that was really it. And then my books hit the market, so the timing was perfect. The other thing is I don't try to beat anybody over the head with religion or politics. I try to keep my books apolitical and non-religious. I don't mind if people are religious. That's great if they are, but my primary characters in the book keep a fairly middle-of-the-road religious view. And I did that intentionally to make it more appealing to a broader audience. One of the other series that was already out there was very religious, and I know it turned a lot of people off at the time. The other thing is that I put a lot of actual useful information in my books. The things that are in there that are real solutions to real problems. I'm not just a guy that watches YouTube videos and writes books about it. I live the prepper lifestyle. I started off doing, turn that off, doing primitive survival, like over 30 years ago. You know, Stone Age stuff, going out and making stone tools and pitch pots and stuff like that, doing all those things, primitive fire, methods, friction fire, and stuff like that. And I still teach those skills to this day. But that's what got me started on it. And then the fact that I live in Florida, and we have hurricanes so frequently, you kind of need to be prepared. And so I started moving into the modern side of preparedness, which is where I like to be. That primitive survival stuff was kind of fun back in the day, but I'm just too old for that crap now. I like to be a little bit more comfortable if I can, so I try to plan ahead and pack a little gear with me.
Yeah, but that's actually, well, me and my son, when we started going outdoors, we weren't that hardcore, but when you learn to start a fire with friction, you actually you perfect the process of making a fire. So I think even if you're having a big lighter right now, I think you'll gain from that.
Oh, I think everybody should. Everybody should know how to do primitive fire. Man has an intimate connection with fire, and a lot of people take it for granted. You know, we there's one laying here someplace. I know there's got to be one laying here, a lighter someplace. But you know, we have the ability today to just and we have fire, and that really takes away from what it actually takes. Is just a human in your native environment, which is the wilderness, to create fire. And I think everybody should know how to do it and should perfect those skills and keep them. But I carry a lighter for a reason.
Yeah. You don't have to always be a stupid prepper. You can also be smart.
Yes.
You don't have to always.
There are times you're not going to get a friction fire when you need a friction fire. I mean, I also carry German flares in my ruck as well for emergency fire starting, not for signaling, for starting fires. And I've done videos on doing that. But you know, because you could get wet if you're in above the tree line or something, or in the snow areas, and you get wet. Hypothermia is a real issue. You can, in cases, have minutes to get yourself warm. So having something that will absolutely start a fire no matter what the conditions are is something I highly recommend, and that's why I carry flares.
Patrick, what level of fire starting are you at? I'm at the flint and steel level right now. Is it lighter?
No. I prefer lighters.
I can do the bow drills, I can do hand drill, I can do fire plows, I can do bamboo fire saws, I can do all the typical things you think of for primitive fire. But like I said, I prefer a big lighter. that's my preferred, you know, or fire steels. You know, this is a little bit of an advanced fire steel here, but the same basic principle. You know, you get in here and you get a spark. But this is about as low as I want to go technologically wise. I consider primitive fire like a lifeboat skill. If I'm doing that, I'm in a lifeboat because my plans have gone miserably awry and I'm in bad shape. So.
So let's go back into your books. So in every book you write, there is a different part of prepping involved, and the titles often give us an indication of the general topic in every book. But when you started, how many books did you have in mind? Are you finished?
No, we're not done. And I didn't know I was writing a book, let alone I was starting a series. I wrote Going Home, like I said, on a forum. It was for my own entertainment, sitting in hotels. I actually started it, the first night I started it, I'll remember exactly when. It was 11:30 at night. I was sitting at home. Actually, I had to be at home that night. Everybody was in bed, and I was sitting in the living room, had my feet up on the ottoman, had a bottle of whiskey beside me, and I was reading stories on the forum, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, these are all kind of good, but they're all sort of missing something from me. And I went, I'm the right one. Like, that much thought went into it. I said, I'll do it on EMP, make it as bad as I can, and I just got started. And the reason I chose where Morgan was when things happened and how they happened is because that day I had drove from Thomasville, Georgia, the very route that Morgan walked home. I had drove that very route home. At the time, I did the control systems in jails and prisons all over the country. All the door access controls and camera systems and intercoms and all that stuff. And so I had left the facility in Georgia and drove home that very route that day. And so that's why I started him where he was. And it was a way for me to kind of war game in my head. What would I do? Because I was on the road all the time. What would I do if something happened? How would I get home? And I carried a ruck in my company vehicle and a handgun, you know, which in America we can do that and get away with it. You guys probably can too, I think. Your firearm laws are a little more...
No way.
No,
you can't have
you're not.
anything.
You can't have anything. Oh, okay. I thought you guys were a little more liberal than the rest of you. But, you know, fortunately here we can, you know, and so I kept a pistol in my ruck in my truck, or in my company vehicle, and so when I was writing the story, I would literally just kind of go through what was in my pack and weave that stuff into the story, and how I do things and stuff like that. And as it progressed, people would ask questions, gear questions, or technique questions and stuff like that. And instead of just answering them on the forum, I would try to answer them in the story. And that's how all that stuff ended up in there. So I thought it was a better way than just saying, oh, this is how, this is what. You know, instead I worked it into the story proper. So.
Yeah. Nice.
It came a book almost every year. But then you ended with a 10th.
Yeah.
Homecoming. And it took 3-4 years to the next one.
It did. I had a bit of a rough stretch there for a while. I had my mom and dad both became very ill at the same time. And then my dad ultimately ended up passing away. My mom was bedridden at the time. She had been going through a pretty rigorous cancer treatment. And so my dad passed away, which left my mom alone and bedridden, and it was basically us taking care of her. And she's made a full recovery. She's cancer-free, healthy as a horse now, and living a great life. You know, and it just took time to get through all that.
Nice.
And then I had on my property here, where I'm at now, I had an outbuilding that was an office. It was fully finished, air conditioned, electric, water, everything. I actually had a room in it with a freeze dryer, dehydrator, stainless countertops, sinks and stuff, where I did all my food prep and storage and things. And in March, not this year, but March of last year, that office burned. And it took a lot of my equipment and stuff with it. I lost my side-by-side, I lost my tractor, I lost my office. I lost 31 firearms in that fire. I lost about 180,000 rounds of ammunition in that fire. I lost half of my shop, my workshop also. It was about a $250,000 hit, and it was arson, and it was a real blow to me, and it kind of put me in a hole for a while. I was not a nice guy to be around for quite a bit. I was pretty angry.
Understandable.
Yes.
You lived up to your name then.
The very angry American.
I was a very angry American at the time.
Yes.
So that's what.
But you have more to come?
Oh yes, there's more to come. I'm thinking that I'm probably going to stop this project at 20 books. There's still quite a bit to do. Because, you know, when a society, especially like America, collapses, we all understand the level of violence that will take place in this country. And that'll reach a peak, you know, and then it will start to taper off. And the people that are left are going to want to try to restore some sort of normalcy, which is what Morgan's always looking for in his life. There is some stability, some normalcy. But governments don't always have our best intent, you know, they don't always have the best intentions, let's put it that way. They might mean well, but they don't do it right. Like in book 12, something happens, and Morgan's very, and it's part of the rebuilding process, but Morgan's he's not on board 100%, and he's very skeptical of it. Even though he's pushed even farther in things, he keeps getting responsibility heaped on that he doesn't want. Because again, he's not a guy looking for credit or fame or anything. He really just wants to be left the hell alone to live his life, and which I relate to. And but because he is capable and he has had such an impact on his community, he keeps getting noticed. You know, so he's really it's his own worst enemy. His success is what's causing him all the trouble. And so something else happens in book 12 that just puts even more on him, and he becomes even a little more frustrated and a little more unsure of the future. So there's a lot to do. Rebuilding a nation is very tough. So.
Yeah.
You're writing number 12 now?
I am, yeah.
Are you?
Yep.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, number 12, we're hoping to have it released, I think, September-ish, in that neck of the woods. Sometime in September, maybe October, but hopefully September.
That sounds good.
I have a lot of reading in front of me because I'm the one. Patrick is the one like reading one book a day.
I can see the stack in his camera
Yes.
view there. So,
Yes.
So what book are you on,
Yes.
Martin?
I've read the three first ones.
Okay. Yeah.
I've read them a lot. I read all the 10 3 times, and now I'm and number 11 only one time.
Okay.
I'm started again this summer. And now I'm on number 2 again.
Wow, you're starting the series all over again. Okay. A lot of people do that.
Yes.
A lot of people, every time a new one comes out, they'll reread the entire series to get caught back up, they say.
Absolutely. Yes.
And there's people that have read them 10 times or more than 10 times, and it blows my mind. I don't consider myself a very good writer. I tell people I'm a storyteller, and people look at me and go, like, "You're a storyteller?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "How do you make money of that?" And I said, "Well, I write them down, and people buy them." And they just look at me funny. And I'm like, "They're called books."
Yes.
What's a book?
What's your driving force behind the books?
Well, it's on the cover of every book, and that's just home. You know, our home is supposed to be our safe place. It's supposed to be our comfortable place, and it's something that we all need. You know, we all need that place that's ours, that we can go to, and you can decompress. You can be yourself. You can relax, and I don't know about you guys here. I've got a 10-acre place that I live on, and I've got outbuildings and animals and stuff, and I don't leave my property a whole lot. I really don't. I'm not introverted or a hermit or nothing, but I mean, I do go out in public, and I travel a lot. We just did a little mini vacation, my wife and I. But I'd like to be at home, you know. This is where all of my preparation takes place. This is where I plan to survive. I'm not of the bug out mindset. I don't believe in that at all, except under very specific circumstances. And so it's trying to achieve that home again when the world is stripped away from you and everything you have kind of falls apart, or what you always known as home falls apart. You know, how do you react and how do you deal with it? You know. We often hear the analogy of fight or flight. You know, people are going to fight or flight, but there's another step there, and it's called freeze. And a lot of people just freeze. And here in the United States, we're a pampered, privileged society. There's no one alive in this country, unless they came from another country, that understands real hardship, real strife, hunger, you know, that kind of stuff. I think we're fixing to get a look at it here pretty soon. But there's going to be a lot of people very unprepared for what's rapidly approaching us, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the same for Sweden, wouldn't you, Patrick? We're
Absolutely.
very spoiled and pampered. We can get anything we want in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, everything's a click
and
away,
we haven't,
right?
Yeah. And I've seen so much advertisement right now for medicine being delivered immediately to you. And that kind of scares me, because that's one of the things you really need to already have.
Oh, absolutely.
That should not be. It shouldn't be a. Yeah.
Yeah, this just-in-time idea that we all live under these days of, it keeps costs down and it does this and does that. You know, that's great as long as everything is functioning as it should. You know, over the last couple of years, we all got a good look at what happens when there's even a slight interruption in that. We're still dealing with it here. I don't know how things are in Sweden. We have empty shelves in grocery stores. Entire sections are empty. We have trucks on the highways that are running out of fuel because they simply can't get it. There's truck stops along the U.S. interstates where there's semis parked all around it for miles waiting for fuel deliveries so they can get back on the road. And that's just here. That doesn't include all the stuff that comes into this country, because we don't make anything here anymore. So everything has to be shipped to this country. And that's happening all over the globe at the moment. And so it's you know, it kind of, the emperor has no clothes, and everybody knows it at this point, as far as the just-in-time inventory thing goes. Never been a real fan of that.
No. Me and Patrick, we talked. We've been talking for a while now about that we're actually experiencing the end of the world as we know it. It's just not the society collapsing; it's the just-in-time society collapsing.
Yeah. People always think they're going to wake up one day and this is the end. This is the end. This is what I've been planning for all this time. And what they don't realize is it's happening all around them. It's a slow grind. It's not going to be a wake up and there it is. It's just going to be every day you're going to realize things are a little worse. You know, we just had 2 Supreme Court decisions handed down in this country that are going to start what I imagine are going to be rather epic levels of violence here. Unfortunately, you know, we've got elements of our society that want to enforce their views on the rest of society, and we got another element of society that just wants to be left alone, really. and we always say that when those guys that are sitting on the couch that don't want to get involved in this stuff are forced to get off the couch and get involved, that's when things are going to change. And that's when the violence is going to escalate dramatically, and then that'll last for, I don't know, I'm honestly predicting close to a decade of strife in this country, of severe strife, and then the dust will settle. We'll see what it looks like after that. So, you know, when America goes that way, that's going to have effects on the rest of the world, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to take a question, Patrick, again?
I can do that. I'm curious, how many books have been printed so far?
Well, in excess of 1 million, probably closing in on 2 million at this point. Yeah, just in that series alone,
that's a lot.
There's well over 1 million. Yeah, there's been a bunch of them. So it's done very well.
Which one is your favorite?
My favorite. Well, my favorite has to be Going Home, the first book. Because again, I didn't know I was writing a book. You know, I wrote that on the forum and I finished it, and everybody was like, "Oh, you need to publish this." I was like, "I'm not going to publish this. I'm no author. Nobody's going to pay money for this crap." I said, "Here, I'll write you another one." And I started writing Surviving Home. But they were insistent. They were very insistent that I should publish. And then my friend posted my PayPal account on the website and said, "Sending money will make them do it." And people did. They sent me several $1,000s. And I was like, well, crap, now I have to do this. I felt obligated. My approach to it was this: look, I'll get this made into a book if you guys will just shut up and leave me alone. I wasn't taking it serious. And so I paid a lot of money, because I didn't take it serious. I did very little research. I just hired a company. I said, here, make this a book. They ripped me off. The first edition was very bad. But it hit Amazon, and the first month it was on Amazon, it made a quarter of my annual salary. And I went,
wow.
Maybe there is something to this book thing. And so I started to take it a little more serious, and I was in the process at the time of self-publishing Surviving Home, because I'd completely written it. And I'm self-publishing Surviving Home when Penguin Books called and made an offer. And the first time I told them no. They were incredulous at the idea that I said no. Old Phil with Penguin is a great guy, good friend. He was at the time. He goes, what do you mean no? He's like, if I made this offer to any other author, he's like, they'd wet themselves. I was like, well, then call them. I don't care. Like, and I hung up on him. And again, I was my own worst enemy getting into this whole thing. And 2 weeks later, he calls me back. We were on vacation up in Ohio with my wife's family, and I'd been having a few cocktails, and I was a little loose. And he calls, and he goes up. He said, hey, this is Phil with Penguin. Bet you never thought you'd hear from me again. And I was like, man, I stopped thinking about you when I hung up on you last time. What do you want? And he's like, well, I got a new number for you. And I was like, all right. So he gives me the new number, and I'm kind of sitting there looking at my phone. I'm like, so were you guys just trying to screw me over the first time? Because this number's way bigger than your first number. And he's like, well, no. He's like, there's risk involved for us. I'm like, what risk? I'm like, you called me. I'm like, you called me. Look, I didn't call you. You called me. So, but I wasn't a fool, and I did take that deal. And that's why we did the first 5 books with Penguin. And we were negotiating to do more books when, as they say, negotiations broke down. Their publisher at the time, he just said something to me that really offended me, and I made a snap decision to not renew my contract with them. And hung up the phone, and I was standing in my front yard, actually, and I sat down on my stairs. My knees were kind of shaking, because I'd made a lot of money with Penguin up to that point. And I had no idea what to do. I didn't have a clue. But when I had first self-published Going Home, I had sold the audio rights to a company called Podium Publishing out of Toronto, Canada. And I had this conversation with Penguin, hung up the phone. I'm sitting on my steps, like, what am I going to do? I don't have a clue. I come inside and I go in my office. And I'm sitting behind my desk, and sitting right here. And Podium Publishing calls me. When Penguin came along, Podium sold Penguin Books the rights to the audio. And the very same day that I leave Penguin, Podium calls me. There's no way they could have known this. But Podium calls me and says, hey, one of our biggest regrets was selling your audio rights. I mean, like, if we can ever work together in the future, you know, we're here. Just let us know. And I was like, funny thing, you should call today. And I told them the story of what happened. And they're like, we'll send you a contract right now. And I was like, well, hold on. I said, we can't switch narrators. I said, I'd love to work with you guys, and I want to. I said, but we have to have the same narrator. We can't change narrators. And they're like, that's not a problem. We'll get him. I'm like, well, that's not good enough. I said, I can't sign a contract on that verbal. Not a problem. And they're like, well, we can't negotiate with him without a contract from you. And I was like, fine. Write a contract that has a 72-hour sunset clause that you've got to get Duke Fontaine to do the narration. And if you do, great. And if you don't, then the contract's void. And they're like, no problem. They sent it to me immediately. I printed it, signed it, scanned it, sent it back. They called me the next morning at 11 a.m. He's in. It was very easy. So I had an audio outlet. And then I learned how to just self-publish. And that's what I do now. I just do it myself. I make considerably more money through self-publishing than you do a traditional publisher. Like, 6 times more per book. It's a lot of money.
Oh. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. The traditional publishers just don't have a lot to offer today, except to put you on the shelves of bookstores, and bookstores are a dying breed. So. Yes.
So number one is your favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a book you're less satisfied with?
Well, no, really. Everything that I've written, I'm very happy with. Every time I write one, though, honestly, when I'm done, when I kind of put that last period on the page and I'm sitting there looking at it for a minute, I'm like, I hope they like it, because I'm never sure about it. I always feel that if I write one and when I'm done, I'm like, this is the one. This one's going to be awesome. It's either going to be a colossal flop or an even bigger success. But I'm very happy with the way they do all of them. I don't have anything I've written that I'm not happy with. I did a nonfiction. We did that before Book 11 came out with a friend of mine, Alan Kay, who's a master at primitive survival. And we did one called Decline and Decay, Strategies for Surviving the Becoming Unpleasantness, as we called it, which gives people like the 10,000-foot view of preparedness, the things you need to do, particularly here in the U.S., to get ready for what's coming. So even that one I'm really happy with, even though that was probably the most difficult book to write, because my writing partner, which I do co-write with other people, but he doesn't use technology. He's not a computer guy. So we would get together and he would hand me legal pads and spiral notebooks, napkins, scraps of paper with stuff written on it, and I would have to sit down and try to transcribe all this garbage into English. And, so it was a tough process.
Yeah, I can believe that. So, but you're not you have been prepping for quite some time. I think more than 30 years.
Yeah. About 33 years. But practicing primitive survival even longer than that. Practicing primitive survival for over 40 probably. So.
Because our podcast and our show, we me and Patrick, we want to, awaken the people in Sweden to start preparing. So we're not talking to the hardcore preppers,
right?
And that's why it's so good to have I'm not going to call you hardcore, but you have a long experience with prepping.
Well, I do consider myself a hardcore prepper. If you guys saw my truck, my truck alone would probably blow the minds of a lot of people in Sweden. Just for what I carry as a daily course in my truck. Not to mention what I carry on my person daily. We have different tiers, we call it. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 levels of things. And my Tier 1 is what's on my body at all times. And I carry the same things every day. Even if I'm on my property and not leaving, I will have a knife, a flashlight, a lighter, a tourniquet. That's on my body. If I'm awake and dressed, which I'm not wearing that at the moment at my desk, but it's all laying right here on my desk. I have a handgun over here. I've got my tourniquets. I've got everything right here, and within reach where I'm sitting. Flashlight, knife, everything's here. But then my vehicle carries much more stuff. I also carry a lot of very advanced medical equipment in my truck. I live in a rural area. Accidents are not at all uncommon. And stopping to help people on the side of the road is also something we do a lot. So I've got vehicle recovery equipment, a lot of medical equipment, long guns. I keep rifles in my truck. I have night vision, body armor, all the typical things you would think of in a defensive or security standpoint. But I also carry food, shelter, water, stuff for building extended stays if I have to out of my vehicle. I can do that. And then there's what I store at home, preparedness-wise. And I'm tackling a major project here right now. We're designing a solar system for my property that'll have about 25,000 watts worth of solar panels and 2 battery systems that will run my house with no sunlight for about 6 days. I'm concerned about the integrity of the power grid in the U.S., and that's going to probably become an issue here soon. So I'm looking to get ahead of that curve and have my solar system in place so my place can function, irregardless of what's happening in the world around it.
Okay, I'll call you a hardcore prepper then.
Yes.
Well, and I spend a lot of time and money doing this. I train a lot. I practice these skills a lot. There's videos out there of me and some friends of mine, Alan Kay, the guy I did the Climb K with. 5 of us walked up on a mountain in Georgia with just clothes on our backs. We spent 3 days out there, and in that time we had shelter, fire, food, water. We made containers. We did everything. We filmed the whole thing. And that was just no tools. We didn't take a knife with us. We took nothing with us. So I still practice those skills. I hate doing it. I really do. At this point in my life, I hate doing it. But I still practice it because I know I need to. I would prefer, a 5-star resort on a beach someplace. I'd like to survive in that environment. But I still go out and get my dirt time in, as we say. So.
Yeah, you need to do that. But what would your message be to a completely new prepper today? What should the main focus be if someone wakes up and feels that I think I need to prepare for stuff?
Well, that's the biggest hurdle is making that realization that no one is coming to save you. Governments have the best intentions. We also know that they're the worst at executing any plan. So in the U.S., one of the things I like to tell people is you are your own first responder. Because when an emergency happens, you're going to be there. Guaranteed. If it's happening to you, you're going to be there. And you need to be prepared to deal with it. The reason I got into the modern preparedness side of things, like I said, was for hurricanes. I didn't want to be that guy, as I saw as a child and growing up and still seeing today in life. A hurricane comes through, and then the power goes out, and the next day there's cars lined up to get a bag of ice and a jug of water from somebody, and I don't want to be that guy. I have life insurance, I have homeowners insurance, I insure my car. I look at preparedness as another form of life insurance. It's to ensure that I can keep living my life with as little interruption. There'll be major interruption, but less interruption than most people because I've planned ahead and I'm ready for it. That's the biggest thing. It's if you have children, if you've got a family, and you're the one that's going to be taking care of them, you need to plan how you're going to take care of them if society starts breaking down. And I think at this point, a lot of people are waking up because of COVID and what happened. And we're seeing the impacts from that. And that's really driven the preparedness market in a big way, especially here in the U.S. It woke a lot of folks up. Our federal government, too, like Mountain House Freeze-Dried Food Company, their dealer portal is closed. Dealers can't even buy their food right now. Augustin Farms is being bought up. They're all shipping. All of them are making their product and sending it to the United States government. It's all going to the Department of Homeland Security. We don't know why they're getting so much of it. We know they're getting it. And I'm not a real smart man, but I know if the federal government is stocking up on freeze-dried food, I might ought to stock up on some food too.
Yeah,
so.
Probably.
They know something I don't.
Yeah.
Next question here. In your books, Morgan started out as a lone wolf with a goal to come home to his family. But soon gathering of people around him and that's continuing in all the books. Are there a place in a shit hit the fan scenario for a lone wolf?
In survival, if we look at nature, there's a few animals live the sole single existence, but not many. If you look at any large predators, most of them, with the exception of cats, well, in Africa they run in packs, but not all of them. Cheetahs, leopards, things like that live solitary lives. But no man, woman, or family can be an island. It's just not possible. You have to go to sleep at some point. That means you got to close your eyes and you're going to be checked out, and you're going to hope for the best, unless you have somebody around that you can trust to keep their eyes open while you go to sleep. Okay, and that's from a security standpoint. And I know that in Sweden, you guys may not have the same view of security that we do here in the U.S. Things may not be as bad for you there, and not that they're bad here. To me, they're not bad at all. I don't have daily problems. I don't worry about my security either. But when times get tough, a lot of folks like to say, I believe all people are inherently good. My version of that is all people are inherently base animals, and their reactions are dictated on the level of pressure they're put under. So the will to survive will come out of every human when the time arises. And so I don't look for people to rise to the occasion. So I plan accordingly. And I try to surround myself with solid, like-minded people. And in Decline and Decay, we have a whole chapter on pressure testing. And by pressure testing, we mean from the equipment we carry to the people we associate ourselves with in our inner circle, which mine's very, very small, inner circle, very small. But we've pressure tested the equipment and the people. I know how these guys are going to react under pressure. I know how they're going to react when things are really, really hard. I know how my gear is going to perform under severe conditions, because I'm very hard on gear. I try to destroy everything, because if it can live through what I dish out, it's a good piece of kit. I break a lot of stuff. I destroy a lot of things, because I'm taking these things because I say someday this may save my life. You know, this fire starter. Someday this fire starter right here might save my life. So I need to know that it will perform under any circumstances that I demand it perform in. And so it's the same with the people. And people are, at the same time, your biggest asset and your biggest liability. You know, you've got to have others around you. You look at any society of peoples, nomads were few and far between. It always took a society of people, and we want to still try to restore that no matter what the conditions we're living under. And finding those people that you can rely on, you know, that are going to be maintaining, you know, a certain level of professionalism, but also the close ties and bonds that a group needs without going overboard or getting selfish, things like that. It's tough to find those people, and it generally takes a lot of time to develop those relationships. And that's what I see is going to be some people's biggest liability, is they're thinking, oh, I'm prepared here, and I'm not going to worry about nothing until I have to deal with it here. Well, once you have to deal with it at home, it's too late. You know, you need to be dealing with it a mile down the road before it ever gets to home. Because once they're at your gate, it's a different story entirely. You know, so you got to surround yourself with quality people, and you need to be prepared to deal with what's coming. You know, whatever you think it is. Now, I'm not saying always look at things from my perspective. The end of my world will look entirely different than the end of your world, you know, or the end of anybody else's world. So prepare for what you're preparing for, but remember to look for solid people with skills too. You know, I would take a good carpenter or an older woman that knows how to can food over a tactical Delta SEAL ninja any day, because they have real skills that can help me live longer. You know, anybody can pull a trigger. That's not that difficult to do. But the hard skills of survival, food preparation, food storage, growing your own food, livestock husbandry, all those things are hard skills that most people just don't have today. And so finding people that can do those things and associating with them and building a network out of those is far more critical in my opinion.
I agree. But let's go back to the. I think you talked a bit about this, but the different categories of people. Let's just say black and white, or good or bad. And I think you said, but is that those personalities or human being? Is there something you see in real life right now, or have you used it more as a way of adding weight to the story?
Oh no, I see it in real life now. I travel all over this country, talking, teaching, doing things like that, and I've met a lot of people. I've met police officers that are on SWAT teams, and when I talk with them about preparedness, I literally had a guy say this to me. He's like, "Oh, me and my team have already talked about it." He's like, "We kick doors for a living now. We'll just keep kicking doors then." So their plan is, as police officers, to rob their neighbors. So you don't know who's a good guy until you start talking to them and hear them out and let them give you their honest opinion on something, which is hard to get from somebody too, by the way, to get their honest opinion, what they really think out of them. Because people will always tell you what they...
That's really professional. But
that's all right.
But it's recording again. Again. I'm sorry.
So we'll go back to that point then. Is what I was saying is people will seldom tell you what they actually mean, but they will always tell you what they need to get what they want from you. So knowing the people you're associating yourself with and knowing them well is very, very important. And even if you know that, all right, my neighbor on the right is a real jackass that I don't want anything to do with because I think he's going to be a major liability, that's valuable knowledge to have. Because you got to kind of keep your eyes on that guy. Whereas if the neighbor on the left is there to help and everything, you can kind of relax a little bit because now he's got to watch the other side of the fence over there. You're only having to really look this way right now. So that's important to know. It's who's around you as well. Yeah. What do your neighbors think? How do they feel about things?
Yeah, we often get, I don't know, Patrick, if you get it, but I get from my colleagues and people I talk preparedness with, there are a couple of guys who says, no, I'm not preparing because if shit hits the fan, I'll be coming to you. And that's probably the truth then.
and if they know where you live, it's certainly the truth. You can share with them the same thing that I say to people when they tell me that. And I'm like, well, the only thing you need to bring is a shovel. Just going to dig one hole when you get here. So I'm not prepared to feed the entire planet. I'm prepared to feed my family and those that are in my circle. And I have people that have pre-staged a lot of stuff here: weapons, food, ammunition, medical supplies, everything. And a lot of people lost stuff in that fire too. But we still have a considerable amount of stuff here because this is a fallback position for me. And I even have a fallback position out of the state, out of Florida. Very, very well prepared. I'm taking a ham radio tower up there. Later in July, I have a 43-foot tower. I'm taking there to put up an antenna on it to try to get HF radio communications between there and here where I live. So that we don't have to rely on the internet or cell phones or anything else. We'll have direct communications. So on my truck, I have an oversized fuel tank going in it. It's got a 28-gallon tank on it now. I'm putting a 56-gallon tank into it so that I can make it all the way to that place in Georgia without having to stop for fuel. So I plan way ahead and stuff, things that most people probably don't think about.
Yeah. Sounds like it. Patrick?
Yes. In your books, the struggle to survive is filled with violence. We have asked a lot of our guests about violence and the good or bad in people. will people become together in a larger scale, or will we see a reality more like in your books, with a lot of violence and a real shit hit the fan?
I think it depends on the society. Like, I think in Japan, if the fecal matter would hit the oscillator, or the shit hits the fan, as you say, I think they'll come together as a society.
Yeah.
The more homogenous a society is, the better they're going to do. Okay, that's looked down on today as nationalism and all this stuff, but it's the truth. In the U.S. in particular, the politicians, the media, they do everything they can to divide the people and to keep us fighting amongst ourselves. And we're seeing the levels of violence increase in this country. You know, in 2020, we had the summers where cities were being burned to the ground and stuff like that. So in the United States, I don't have a whole lot of faith in the average American. And I feel violence will be, you know, the course du jour, you know, for most of the time. Security is paramount here in the U.S. because there are more firearms in this country than there are people. In civilian hands alone in this country, there's estimated to be 8 trillion rounds of ammunition in civilian hands alone. And over 400 million firearms in civilian hands. So a lot of people think when they buy a gun, they're like, all right, I've got my gun, and I don't have to worry about nothing now because I've got a gun. But they don't take training necessary to learn how to use it. But then there's an element of us that do. We spend a lot of time training. I have a 100-meter range on my property, and I shoot weekly. And I don't just stand with my feet welded to the ground and shoot at a paper target. We do a lot of movement, shooting and moving. Me and my wife carries a pistol too, and I take her on the range and we work together. Like if we were just in public and something was to happen, how we're going to respond to that. So we prepare and practice for it. A lot of people don't. They think, you know, I bought the gun, I'm good to go. I mean, they've never even taken it out of the box and shot the damn thing, but they think that when the day comes they're going to need it. Just like the guys that buy seed vaults, you know, these cans of seed, they think that the day the shit hits the fan, they're going to become farmers. It doesn't work that way. And self-defense doesn't work that way. And as I've said before, I have very little faith in humanity. You know, I believe people are base animals, and they will react based on the level of pressure they're put under. And Americans, as I said earlier, they're soft, pampered, privileged people. We're getting fatter, dumber, and slower by the day, in my opinion. So I don't expect them to behave nicely when things go down. I've seen the bad side of folks in this country, and that's when they're restrained. When all restraint is gone, when that thin veil of civility falls away, you're going to be able to see people for what they really are. Yeah, I don't have much faith in them.
Oh, a hungry person is a dangerous person.
That is the most dangerous person. That is the revolutions are started by hungry people most of the time.
Yeah.
And the world is getting hungrier as we speak.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts about the things we see in the world today? We see inflation, death of just in time. We have war in Europe. Sweden and Finland being neutral countries applying for membership in NATO.
I was disappointed in that one. I was really disappointed
in
that one. Yeah. Yeah.
But is this something like brewing in a cesspool or a thing, and becoming a huge shit hit the fan? Well,
there is, and you're looked at as a conspiracy theory kook when you say this, but it's legitimate. You can look it up online, and it's called Agenda 2030. It's the WEF's plan for how the world will operate, and you can look it up. There's 17 topics, 17 points to Agenda 2030, and they said that COVID advanced their agenda light years. There's so much. They've actually moved it. Now they've moved it from thinking they'll achieve their goals by 2030. They've moved it up. I think they'll achieve them sooner. And part of those are forced migration, like controlling what people eat. They want to stop the production of beef, lamb, and pork, I think it is. They don't want people to eat that no more. the forced migration as in moving people from rural areas into urban areas. They want the mega cities. And you see things even like the metaverse that Facebook's trying to create as a component of that. When Klaus Schwab said, you will live in a pod, you will own nothing, and you will be happy, they mean that. That is what they want for people. And the way they achieve that is partly through this metaverse garbage where you have a virtual world you can interact in. You never have to go outside because you can put this headset on and be any place you want to be. The movie, if you guys have seen Ready Player One, is a pretty apt description of the life that they want the average person to live in this world. Not them, of course. Now, they'll still have their yachts and private jets and, Wagyu beef, but the rest of us, they don't want to have that stuff. And that's their agenda. You can read it. It's their own language. It's laid out right in front of you. The powers that be will always tell you what they're going to do before they do it. And then they do it, people act surprised. And I'm like, no, they told us that 3 years ago. And here we are. It's not a surprise to me.
Yeah, eating plant beef burgers.
Yeah, or test tube grown beef or whatever. I'm not a fan. I think people like Bill Gates are some of the most dangerous people on the face of this planet, in my opinion. So.
Patrick, are you shocked?
No. I'm not.
No.
Good.
I'm not. Now, we started to tell you if you had any questions about prepping in Sweden or Sweden in general.
I'm curious as to what the average prepper, for lack of a better term, in Sweden, what are they preparing for? What is their biggest fear that they're looking at?
What do you think, Patrick?
I can only speak for myself, and prepping for me is I want to have the things and the knowledge to live as I live today. And
whatever happens.
Yes, whatever happens. I want to live as I do today. So I'm preparing for anything and everything.
Yep. Everything from a job loss to the end of society for a term, and that's what most of us are doing. We use the analogy all the time of preparing for the end of the world. I'm getting ready for the shit to hit the fan, because if that's the goal, that's the target we're aiming at. Even if we miss a little low, we're still pretty prepared, aren't we? If I'm aiming to prepare to survive the end of the world and I lose my job, well, all those preps are going to help me. Everything I've done to prepare are going to help me. So I aim as high as I can. Even if I miss low, I'm still doing pretty good. The two biggest things that I'll recommend to people when we talk preparedness, they're not all the cool guy stuff. In the U.S., there's a fascination with the tactical end of things. Guns and cool guy gear. And I have it all too, but I use mine. They're not shiny and they don't look new. My stuff's beat up and used. But food and water, that's the two things. All right. Water, number one, because if you don't have water, you will have to leave where you are and go to water. That's why predators in Africa hunt around water holes. That's everybody's going to come get a drink, right? And then food.
Yeah.
Being able to produce your own food has to be the end goal, because if you're prepared, and let's just say you've stored a year's worth of food, what do you plan to eat on day 366? And that needs to be the thought that's in our heads. I've given myself a year to get it together to start producing my own food, and I've got to be able to pull that off in that time frame. Or if I've stored 2 years, I've given myself 2 years of food, and I need to be prepared to produce my own food at the end of 2 years. Because otherwise, you're going to be pretty hungry.
Yeah.
I don't know what hunting is like in Sweden.
We talked about that. It's regulated, but it's. I think we have a whole lot of hunters, actually. But just to go back to your question, I think the average listener and average person in Sweden, I think the ones preparing right now Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're actually looking at the power outage scenario. And that's also good because that covers a lot of things. Everything from water, hygiene, food, stuff like that.
So what is your grid run off of? Are you guys using solar, coal burning power plants, natural gas, nuclear? What runs Sweden's power?
Right now we have been under the influence of the environmentalist party, so we have been shutting down nuclear power and instead relying in wind and water.
We have some left.
Yeah, we have some
Thank
left.
God.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. But that actually, and we are importing. Obviously, we have been importing Russian natural gas.
That's what I figured.
And also from other countries who tend to burn coal. So, so we're in a dire situation, you could say, because even now in the summer, I think, was it last week, Patrick, where the energy costs went up 15,000% during Monday. And that gives you an idea of what's going to happen.
So you guys are a net importer for your energy needs, the wind and solar are great, but you need to have that backup. You know, I think shutting down nuclear power plants, there haven't been that many accidents with nuclear power plants over the years. There's been a couple of notable ones. But they're some of the cleanest energy. Now, they do have long-term consequences as far as storing that spent fuel and stuff like that. But you've got to have something that you know will work when you need it to work with minimal input, and that really is nuclear. I'm a fan of nuclear energy myself. While at the same time I'm building a big solar plant here on my property, I don't think it's... Unless you do it in a distributed manner, in other words, where if every house had its own solar plant, okay, and we weren't trying to do these elaborate grid systems where we're doing solar on a large scale and then distributing it through the grid, you still run into the exact same problems you run into with conventional power. If you distribute the grid as far as each home's producing its own energy, then you completely remove the need for the grid to start with. You don't even need to worry about that no more. It can go away because we're looking in the U.S., our power grid is antiquated. In the summertime in California, the cables get so hot they droop down, touch trees, and start fires. Texas can do the same thing. So we need to rethink how we do power, I think, globally. And the green environmentalists definitely have some valid points, but in my opinion, they're missing the big picture. So.
We agree.
Yeah. Not talking about politics, just agree.
I like how polite you were about that.
I actually missed one question when we talked about preparedness. I want to know, have you done any mistakes in your prepping when you began? Something that you might want to share with our listeners who might be starting their preparedness journey.
Well, it's like somebody asked me one time, they said, what was the best dollar you ever spent on prepping? And I was sitting there thinking about that, and I was in a podcast, actually, and my wife happened to walk through the room, and she heard the question. And I'm sitting there thinking, and she looks at me, and she's like, the first one. And I was like, yeah, you're right, actually. So the best dollar I ever spent prepping was the first dollar I ever spent. Now, have there been mistakes along the way? Oh, yeah. I've tried every kind of piece of equipment, gear you can imagine. I've made some colossal blunders in food storage until I kind of perfected that. I've wasted thousands of dollars on food that ended up going bad until I learned the proper ways and took it serious too. I figured, this is easy. Get it, put it in Mylar bags, so this thing, seal it up. It's good to go. It's a little more delicate than that, So taking the time to learn, is the biggest thing I'll tell people. If you're fixing to make an investment in something, be it food, be it a piece of equipment, take the time to learn before you pull the trigger on that, and so that you know that when you go to do this, when you finally decide to spend that money, that you have the knowledge base to to properly employ it, use it, whatever. And so you get your value out of it. Like I had a freeze dry machine. I spent almost $4,000 on a freeze dryer, and I was freeze drying my own food, and it was doing great. We were packaging food, everything was going swimmingly, and then rats infested one of my buildings and ate all of it. And I mean all of it.
Shit.
Yeah, that's what I said. I mean, I had ribeye steaks and shrimp freeze dried. I was going to be eating surf and turf when the shit hit the fan. I was going to be eating beans and rice. So we all learned, and that was one of the biggest hits because that happened after the fire, where I lost about 70% of my food storage. The fire took out about 70% of my food storage, and then the rats came in and took out about another 25% of that. So it really knocked me down.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. The worst thing you could do is not start prepping. That would be the
best
biggest
day to
mistake.
start prepping was 10 years ago. The next best day to start prepping is today.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Patrick, would you do the honors to do the final question, which is, I think I know the score.
Yes. It's up to you, Martin.
Go ahead.
No. Yes. We usually torment our guests with a scale of preparedness. It goes from 1 to 10, where 1 means that you are not prepared at all. You probably have some sodas in your fridge. Nothing more. A 4 means that you can easily sustain your family for more than a week. And 10 is total off-grid and self-sustained.
On that scale, I'd probably put myself close to an 8. We do food production on my property. We're fixing to put in a much larger garden, actually. That's one of the things that's in the works. But where I live, everything has to have a 6-foot fence around it, or the deer just destroy it. I live in a very rural area. So putting in a garden is an expensive process here, Posts, tall posts, too. I got to buy 10-foot posts. I got to buy enough fencing to go around this thing. So it all costs money. We're doing that, and then I'm putting in my own power system. Once I have my power system in place, I'd rate myself higher. But I'd say I'm probably a solid 8. I've got a good friend of mine, my fallback place. He's a solid 10. They're 100% food production, livestock, everything, water. I mean, the only thing they don't have is long-term power, which their house is designed to operate without, actually. So we could live there indefinitely and not have to come off that mountain. Yeah. So that's why it's my fallback position. But a lot of work goes into it. Being self-sufficient on food is labor-intensive, and people underestimate it. We talked about how privileged we all are, and we're not used to work. We live rather sedentary lifestyles. But when you go from that sedentary lifestyle, where today a 3,000-calorie diet does wonders for you, and you go to a lifestyle where you're having to walk everywhere you go and manual labor is involved and everything, you're going to need to double your calorie intake, up to 6,000 calories a day. So now think about that in terms of food storage and food production, what that means. It's a lot. You have to grow a lot of food, and a lot of people underestimate it.
And I guess that would also take time, so that would actually be your actual work. You wouldn't go
for my buddy up there,
work and then
that's all he does. He doesn't have a job. He maintains a homestead. His wife is a doctor, so that's where their money comes from. But his entire existence is running a homestead, and he's got a herd of goats. And, he's got a herd of Great Pyrenees to go with him, and he keeps a lot of chickens. And so that's the protein side of things. And then there's all the farming that happens, and the orchards and the fruits and the stuff that are planted there that'll have to be maintained, harvested. And then you got to store all this stuff. You got canning, dehydrating, in some cases freezing, if you have power. So, yeah, you're right. It's like a full-time job. That just-in-time inventory is the only thing that's allowed us to get away from that agrarian lifestyle. And I think it's going to be making a comeback.
I think so, too. All right. Any other
One last question.
Yeah?
One last question from me.
Okay. Go.
What's the title of number 12?
The title of number 12? actually have a title for it. It's the first book in the series that I came up with a title before I even started the book. Every other book, the title came to me as I was writing the book. At some point, it would just pop into my head. But this one, I actually had a title for it before I started it. But I haven't told anybody yet, I don't think. But I'll go ahead and I'll give it to you guys. And the next book, book 12, will be called Exploring Home. Might give you an idea of what they're going to be up to a little bit. So,
Exciting.
Thank you.
as I said, there's some big changes that happen.
And the
We're the
world
first to know
premiere.
that.
Yeah, you are. You're the first ones to hear that. So,
Yay.
a little exclusive for you.
Yes. Wonderful. Do you want to know anything else? Or do you have any other questions to us?
Well, I'm curious because, like I said, we don't hear much about Sweden, Finland, in the news here. I mean, I track some stuff most people don't. But I know that several years ago you guys had the refugee crisis, and there's a lot of issues associated with that. How are things now, societal-wise, in Sweden?
That's a bit political, but what, do you want to say anything, Patrick? I think
The Swedish government jag kan inte förklara på engelska.
I think we.
It's a hard question.
It is. Here's the reason. I'm going to tell you why I asked the question first. Let me tell you why I asked the question.
Yeah.
It's because you're fixing to face an even larger wave of the same thing. You guys are aware of that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The government didn't done the job correctly.
Yeah.
There are small societies in the society now.
Yeah, and their voices are being heard more and more. These sub societies. So, and I would say we're seeing the effects. We welcomed a lot of immigrants. The government didn't have a plan, and now we're suffering the consequences of that. I think. Is that well put, Patrick?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's politely, very well,
Politely
put. Yes. and again, the reason I asked that is I know I followed that at the time very closely, and I was aware of a lot of the things that happened. And with what's going on in Ukraine, so much of Africa relies on Ukrainian wheat, which they're not going to get.
Yeah.
And we just saw the incident in Morocco where the Algerians raided that little border, the little enclave, the little Spanish enclave. I just forgot the name of it. And the Moroccans ended up killing like 80 of the Algerians trying to get in there. I think that was just the first little sampling of what's to come. Like, we're facing a major immigrant crisis on our southern border. We have a president that's doing the same thing. They've kind of kicked the doors open, and they are coming in by the tens of thousands every month. I mean, tens of thousands. And you guys, sadly, I think are going to face more of the same in your immediate future as well. And I know security is harder, more difficult for you guys there than it is us here. Something to think about, let's say,
I mean, if you see it from a gun-owning perspective, the government is making it harder and harder and harder to get the licenses for guns, and they're making life harder for the hunters. Turns out the ones doing all the shootings, they don't have legal guns.
In the U.S., we hear every day in the media about gun violence. This is simply a machine. This is a machine that will only do what I tell it to do. It takes a human to make this thing do what it does. It's just a simple machine. Guns are not violent. Humans are violent. More people are beat to death with hammers in this country every year than are shot with guns. So it's not a thing problem. It's a people problem. And The politicians don't want to focus on that because that's a much more difficult problem to address. Things like mental health and things of this nature. The pharmaceutical companies have made trillions of dollars off of getting everybody on a pill, and a lot of those pills don't work right. But then people get so used to having that pharmaceutical in their bodies that when they don't have it, they just become unhinged. Those are the tougher problems that no one wants to address. As a human being, in my opinion, you have the natural right of self-defense. If you kick a dog, the dog's going to bite you, okay? He's not going to slap you with his paw because that's not the best weapon he has. He's going to use his teeth. It's the best weapon he has. Same goes for humans. We have the natural right of self-defense. And a lot of places try to tell you don't have that, which is mind-boggling to me. I don't know. Like I said, a rat has the right of self-defense. If a cat attacks it, it's going to fight. He's not going to just roll over and say, yeah, you got me. They're trying to tell us that we're higher animals and we don't need to be doing that. No, we're higher animals, and that's all the more reason we need to be doing that, because the evil amongst us is a higher intelligence as well. So I prepare for that, and I feel bad for folks who cannot take their own security into their own hands to ensure it. So
yeah,
I think
all
Europe
right.
is ripe for some change overall, and maybe this will bring some of that about.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully. All right, we don't have any more questions for you, Chris. It's been a true honor to have you on our show.
Oh, I appreciate you guys having me. It's been interesting talking with you.
Absolutely.
To see how people around the world are doing things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to finish this in Swedish, if you want to learn some Swedish. Tack för att ni lyssnar. Hoppas att ni har tyckt att det här har varit intressant. Som vanligt, sköt om er. Preppa lugnt och glöm inte vattnet. Hej då, bye bye.